Today I'm going to show you how to tie a really unique fly. This fly originated for Pyramid Lake specifically. It's called the Pyramid Lake Beetle or the Popcorn Beetle. It's most commonly tied in this color combination using white foam and chartreuse chenille. This fly is meant to be fished on a retrieve with a sinking line. The foam helps it float right off the bottom so it stays within the fish's strike zone pretty much during the entire retrieve. It's a fly that's very effective and gets eaten on its own, but it's also a fly that's kind of a tool. It helps suspend your other flies, like if you have a woolly bugger or some midges or something. It helps suspend it off the bottom. So this will be on the point, and it will rise anywhere from within 6 inches to 2 feet of the bottom of the water. And then everything between your point fly and the tip of your sink tip will also be suspended a little bit. That's called a washing line rig. It's very popular in the UK. So this fly is super easy. It just uses 2 materials. So the first is some sort of foam. I prefer a high density foam, 3 millimeters fine. This one's from Wapsi. And then some sort of chenille. I prefer Cactus chenille. This one's a size medium, I think. Also tie them in size large. Some people prefer just your typical rope chenilles, kind of like a mop fabric. But whatever you want is fine. Pyramid Lake is kind of one of those places where the fly pattern doesn't really matter as much as the bite. If the fish are in and if they're biting, they're most likely going to take your fly if it's in the strike zone. For this fly, I'm just going to use a Tiemco curved nymph hook. I really like this hook because of the downturned eye. So this is one I've rigged up with the typical loop knot I'd be fishing it with. You can see that downturned eye it just makes it a lot easier to tie on because it's down away from the phone. If it was a straight eye, it would be pretty difficult to get up in there to tie it off. Now the lip of this fly is what makes it so unique, other than the fact that it floats. This lip basically acts like it just pushes water. And so as you strip this across the bottom, it's going to wiggle. And that's, in my opinion, what makes this fly so effective. It's not really the fact that it floats so much as the fact that it gives it some unique action and it draws in the fish. Some people totally go overboard with the foam, in my opinion. You'll see people use 4 millimeter or even 2 pieces of 3 millimeter glued together because they think, hey, this fly is supposed to float, so the more it floats, the better, right? Well, what happens in that scenario is if you have too much foam, you lose that nice curved lip, and that curved lip is what's going to push the water, and that's what's going to give your fly movement. Also, sometimes you'll see this tied with a really long lip, and that's also not good because then as that pushes water, that lip is going to fold over, and then it's not going to do anything. So this lip is very rigid because I use the high density foam, and I've also, when I'm done, I use a little bit of super glue on the thread wraps there and underneath, so that's not going anywhere. This fly is a lot more durable than you think as well. So that's something you love to see. Popcorn beetle full of teeth marks and still holding together great. That lip is still strong. I'll still use this fly again this year. All right, so let's get going on this. So first I'm going to start with a thick thread, 140 denier. This one's ultra thread. In white, I like to match the color of the foam. You're just going to start by getting your thread on the hook shank. Come back a little bit past the barb. And go back about 3 eye lengths behind the eye of the hook. Now for your foam, I use an X-Acto knife and a straight edge, and I cut them down to 3/8 of an inch strips. That's roughly the size of the hook gap. You want to have enough that when it wraps around on the end, you get that nice curved lip we were talking about. To make tie-in easier, I just cut a little notch on the end. As well as put a little bit of super glue on the top. Now, I was saying earlier that this fly is supposed to float, but that's not what it makes it so effective. Yeah, that's true, but you do still want it to float as well as possible, and you want it to float for a long time. You want it to be able to suspend your woolly bugger off the bottom a little bit, and I'll show you the size of woolly buggers I'm typically using out there. Big old things like this with big heavy hooks. It's okay for them to be rubbing in the sand, but it's even better if they are up a little bit. So as much buoyancy as you can get out of these beetles, the better. Okay, so I'm just going to place this on the back there, and I'll kind of shape it around the hook. And I do my first thread wrap, do a couple and cinch it in. Then I'm going to move back maybe 2 millimeters or so, do another one, so that creates a little ball. Then I'm going to keep repeating that until I get back to where my thread ends. And by creating these little foam balls, you're going to ensure extra buoyancy on the fly. Okay, now comes my cactus chenille. So chenilles come on a little rope that if you kind of pick at the ends, you can expose the rope. And that's what I'm going to tie in. I'm going to tie it in right on those last thread wraps from where I created the last little foam ball. Okay, then I'm going to work my thread back forward, and what I'm going to do is every time my thread is underneath, I'm going to advance it to the next set of thread wraps. Go around once, advance it, go around once, advance it, so on and so forth till I'm at the front. Now I'm going to add a little bit of thread up here just to make tie-in easy once I do get my chenille up there. Throw in a little half hitch. Slide my bobbin cradle over just to get that out of the way. Now I'm going to wrap my chenille pretty sparsely, and again my chenille is just going to follow those groups of thread wraps. So I'm going to go once around. Now this time I'm going to advance when I'm on the top. Cross over to the next one, go once around, cross over to the next one. If you get a bunch of fibers facing forward, just preen them back with your fingers. Around, forward, around. See right there, those ones went forward, so I'm going to kind of do my best to move them back. Go over. And then again, I'm going to come around the top here. Do 1 or 2 complete wraps right there. I'm only going to do 1. That looks pretty good. Okay, this is a thick thread. It flattens out quite a bit on its own, so I'm just going to give it a clockwise spin to cord it back up. That's going to help me tie this down real tight. Do 1 wrap to capture my chenille, a 2nd wrap to capture my chenille. Then I'm going to switch hands and do a couple thread wraps in the front just to really anchor that down and suck it in. Okay, now I have to make a nice little landing pad here at the head for my foam to tie in. So if I'm not able to pull these strands of chenille back, or the little flashy pieces that come out of the chenille, I'm just going to go around with my scissors and kind of snip them back a little bit before covering them up with thread wraps. I just really don't want any materials to crowd the eye of the hook on this fly. Makes it hard to tie it on, especially when it's windy and cold and snowing like it so often is out of Pyramid. Okay, now that those are out of the way, I'll just put down some thread wraps to make a nice smooth head. And you can see I'm leaving plenty of room. You don't want to wrap your chenille all the way up to the eye of the hook because you still got a lot to do. You got to pull this forward, and you want to leave yourself room to glue it in, to do some good whip finishes, and you want to leave room to be able to tie on your fly when you're ready to fish it. Before I pull this chenille over, I'm just going to preen everything forward. Then I'm going to cut the chenille right down the center on the top. Make a little groove for that foam to sit on. Then I'm going to take more super glue, and I'm just going to lay it on top of where I just cut the chenille so that the foam sits on that and you just know it's not going to pull apart. You don't want to stretch this super hard, and you also don't want to leave it loose. So I kind of just push it like that. Then once I'm at this point, I'll push it to make my little curved lip, and then I'll take a thread wrap around, a second thread wrap, kind of start pulling it tight, and then I get tighter with each consecutive thread wrap. Now I can kind of bend this lip to the way I want it to sit, add some more wraps. Okay, and before I go any further, what I'm going to do now is pull this back, put some thread wraps under here, then add my whip finish. Snip my thread. Okay, now I'm going to pull this forward and I'm going to snip it to where I want it. I basically want that to end just right in front of where my hook eye is. So I pull it this way, use the eye of the hook as a guide, and just try to make a nice straight cut all the way across. Push it down to give you that curve. Now I'm going to add super glue to the thread wraps underneath. Then just a little bit on top to soak into these thread wraps on the top, and that's also going to add some rigidity to prevent that lip from folding over as you fish it. So like I said, this is the most famous and for me the most productive color. Some other colors I will fish though is olive chenille with olive foam, purple chenille with black foam. This one's probably my second favorite, second most productive. Purple with blue foam. This one isn't productive for me that often, but there have been a couple times where this is the only thing I can get to bite and they go crazy for it. So this has definitely saved a few days for me while out on the ladder. Then black and red's another goodie too. Caught a lot of fish on that one. I know people who swear by this combination the same way I swear by the classic white and chartreuse. So there's a lot of different hooks you can tie this on. I really like, can't remember which Firehole sticks it is specifically, but it's a straight hook with a downturned eye, and I think I get it in size 8 or 10. This Tiemco is a size 8. It's great. I also will tie some on saltwater hooks. It doesn't have the downturned eye, but it's not a big deal. The eye's so big it's easy to tie on. Another benefit about these saltwater hooks is they're so light that you get a little bit more flow out of your fly. They're just a little expensive. I happen to have some left over from tying some clousers and stuff, so I will make some. So when I'm in Pyramid here in a week or so, I'm going to do a video of how I get this system all rigged up, and I'll show you why it's such a good and effective fly.